Thank you for staying with us on Citizen Weekend. With me on set, we have Ambassador Erastus Mwencha, who has previously served as Deputy Chair of the Africa Union Commission. Other than that, Secretary General COMESA. We also have joining us from Diani, Professor Migai Akech, Professor of Law. And he has previously worked with the African Union and more specifically the Africa Peer Review Mechanism. So these are gentlemen who know what they are talking about. But first, let's get a sense of what the AUC chairmanship involves. And elections are held every 4 years. Let's take a look at that. The elections are held every 4 years, and the vote is by the Assembly of Heads of State and Government. There we go. The elections for 2025 through to 2028 will be held on February 2025 at an African Union summit. The basis is the principle of interregional rotation, and therefore that means the Eastern region will be producing the chairperson of the AUC. They have until the 6th of August 2024 to nominate their candidate. We also see here what the role of the AUC chair is: CEO, legal representative, meaning all the legal instruments fall within his remit, and he is also an accounting officer. The academic requirements: Masters in Law, International Relations, Economics, Diplomacy, Management, Business Administration, Political Science, Social Sciences. Same for the PhD, either or those listed there. We also see here that those who are up against Raila Odinga are the Djibouti Foreign Minister, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf. We also have Somalia's former Foreign Affairs Minister, Fawzia Adam. And we also have the former Seychelles VP, Vincent Meriton. The countries that have so far pledged to back Kenya's candidate include Uganda, Ethiopia, Ghana, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe. All right, we'll begin with Ambassador Mwencha first. What are Raila Odinga's chances?
Well, thank you very much, Olive, and thank you for giving us this opportunity. And good evening, viewers. It's an election, but if you look at the candidate himself, he's up to the task. He's a first mover advantage, and he has also come up with a very credible 5-point plan, which I think speaks very well to the continent's pressing agenda. And so I would see him quite, competitive in this election.
So we've been told that the EAC will front a single candidate. Given it is the Eastern region, who do we need to convince?
The Eastern African region is comprises 14 countries, stretches from Djibouti all the way to Madagascar, and that's why you already have 4 candidates that have come up. And so it is, there are 2 ways. They can discuss among themselves, or they wait to be eliminated during the ballot. The way the elections goes is the heads of state, of course, vote by secret ballot, as you indicated. And the candidate who doesn't, who is the last in that list when they vote, each candidate is scored X amount. X votes, and so you'll see who's the last is dropped out until you're left with 1. And that one still has to go for elections until they get 2/3. So yes, I mean, that is what could happen, eliminated during election process, or they agree if they discuss among themselves.
Let's bring in Professor Migai Akech. Raila Odinga told us that he was interested. It is he who of his own volition, expressed interest in this post, and that he was surprised when this administration backed his bid. What do you think Raila Odinga is looking for in the AUC chairmanship?
What do you mean? What is he looking for? I think it is looking for an opportunity to serve the continent, as he has articulated quite well. From that perspective, I think he'd be an excellent candidate. But he's not just an excellent politician. I think he's also a very good diplomat, which are the two roles that you need for an effective AUC chair.
So, but politically, what does he stand to gain, do you think, if he's successful in his bid?
I would look at it more from the stature that the position brings, because in the very few people that have served in that capacity, it has some prestige. So I think for somebody in his at his level, I mean at the level at which he is in terms of what he's been doing career-wise, it would be a good way of signing off. It is prestigious to serve your continent in that role, I would imagine.
All right. So if we look at retired President Uhuru Kenyatta, you have the government in power saying you have retired, keep your nose out of political affairs. Rather, don't get into the political debates. Is the same required of an AUC chair? Would he be required to keep mum?
In terms of local politics?
Yes.
I think he would be, it is such a heavy job. I don't think he'll have the time to give attention to local political matters, even if he wanted to. It's a very heavy job. It is administering the top institution of the continent. It is looking at all the questions around conflicts on the continent. It is looking at all the questions of reform so that Africa works better. It's a very busy, it would be a very busy assignment. I don't think he'd have time for local politics.
This is not the first time.
However much he wanted.
All right, Ambassador.
And then, of course, once he goes to Addis, I think politics is about presence. Local politics requires presence. Once he goes to Addis, assuming he gets the job, I don't think he'd be traveling back to participate in local politics. It doesn't work. It wouldn't work like that.
All right, Ambassador, this is not the first time that Kenya is making a bid at the AUC chairmanship. We had Ambassador Amina Mohammed, and she suffered a painful loss. I was in Addis, and there was a sense that Kenya's neighbors had betrayed her. What lessons do you think we take away from that experience?
Well, this is a different candidate, different time, different profile. And so I would imagine I would give it a new perspective, because that was 2016 when that happened. 8 years later, things change a lot.
Mm-hmm. So Raila Odinga had to overcome certain hurdles, including there was Executive Council decision made, I believe it was on March 15th, regarding the gender requirement. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, the gender has always been there. In fact, even when we were serving there, it was the Constitutive Act says that this AU is an equal employer, and therefore there must be 50% gender representation, meaning the commission, when I was serving, we were 10, and so 5 were ladies and 5 were gentlemen. And of course, you know that later on there was a lady who was chairperson, was her deputy. There was no problem. The gender still was very much balanced. But the first time when I was there were 2 men. One chairperson was a man, and I was a man. So that wasn't the case, but there were still 5 ladies and 5 gentlemen. There was a reform that was undertaken in 2018. Not 2015. It is 2018, but that reform started in 2017. under President Kagame. Some of the outcome of that, which was institutional reform, was, of course, to reduce the number of commissioners, the commission from being 10 to 8, a chairperson, deputy chairperson, and 4 commissioners. And so some of the rules provide that still you have 4, but this time there was insistence that if the chair is a gentleman, a lady will have to be deputy. So that kind of arithmetic does work out.
All right. Professor Migai Akech, Kenya is pulling out all the stops where this bid is concerned. Why is this significant? Why would occupying this office be significant for the Republic of Kenya? Is it a prestige issue?
It is very much a prestige issue. And if you look at it from an international relations perspective, countries try to seek to have influence beyond their borders, and Kenya is no different. And this is what countries like in the African continent, countries like South Africa, Ghana, Rwanda do very well, and incidentally Chad as well. Remember that the current AUC chair is from Chad. So it is about having influence or enhancing a country. Your national as the chair of the AUC goes some way.
All right. President William Ruto has been very vocal about certain issues, green financing, restructuring of the global financial architecture. Do you think this is informed in part by that?
It could be, but I think that is getting way ahead. If you look at the African Union and Ambassador Mwencha spoke about it. From around 2017, these are the so-called Kagame reforms. The heads of state and government have identified a number of things, ills that bedeviled the union that need to be resolved. So first of all, the AU has to be a more effective organization. Before we start talking about these new agenda items, we have to conclude the Kagame reforms. And just to give you a few, some of the challenges are that the African Union has not been very good in terms of implementing the decisions of the summit. And the summit is a summit of the heads of state and government. Many of us as citizens of the continent do not see the AU as being very relevant. There are issues around subsidiarity in terms of what decisions are taken at the level of the union, what decisions are taken at the level of the regional mechanism, the regional economic communities, for example. And this plays out very well in the arena of peace and security. And then, of course, we can't even fund our union, and which is a huge agenda. The AU's budget is funded mostly by development partners, and that cannot be right. And so we have to address these issues before we move to these other new age issues, if you may call them that. So there's still a lot to be done. Some of it has been achieved. But as you can imagine, things move very slowly in the union. So we have a long way to go, I would imagine.
All right, Ambassador, having served as a deputy chair of the AUC, what advice would you have for Raila Odinga? A strategy team has been unveiled. What would you say to them?
I think he's got his hands on eyes on the ball in terms of articulating the agenda of what he wants to achieve when if elected. He has also put a team in place. Structure has been created to support. The country is galvanized around his candidature, including the leadership. And so I don't think I can advise him beyond that. I think he's on the right track.
How about you, Professor Migai Akech? What would you say to the strategy team? What would you say to Raila Odinga on his bid for the AUC chairmanship?
I would ask his advisors to look at the Kagame reforms, what has happened, and why we haven't achieved them as quickly as we wanted to, and devise a strategy around that. So any new agenda has to be tempered by the realities of how the African Union works. It's a very slow-moving vehicle. We move at the pace of the least common denominator, if you wish. It's a very slow-moving vehicle.
All right, there we go. Thank you very much, gentlemen. You have something to add?
Well, I thought I would address that aspect of the Kagame report. In fact, if you look at the 5 points of Prime Minister he has raised, is one of them. But let me talk about the agenda of the African Union as spelled out in the Constitutive Act and the various programs. If you go from AU to now, when AU was established, the agenda that was given to AU to colonize the continent, bring the continent together in terms of unity, and also then focus on how to address the issue of peace and security. Decolonization was successfully achieved. It was painful. Africa paid by blood, and that was successfully achieved. Now let's come to, and every 10 years, AU has always come up with, or called it AU agenda of what we want to achieve. One of them was integration. And the design of the continent way back in 1963 was that integration would have to be pushed by regional economic communities. So you cannot isolate the achievement of the AU from that of regional economic communities. And a lot of work has been done in that area in terms of reducing barriers, movement, but also in facilitating movement of goods in the continent, free trade areas, and the rest. Of course, one of the biggest challenges, and having been privileged to be close to, or served there for almost 10 years, is, of course, financing of the African Union. The way it is, of course, at the moment, when we joined there, that was one of the things that was brought out and which is spelled out in Agenda 2063. That Agenda 2063, Africa should start taking care of itself. And so there's a progressive program towards that. One of them is introduction of a levy, which is 0.2% member states have to pay to customs. Kenya is doing it already, which then is used to finance the union. At the moment, all the, what I would call it, administrative costs are taken care of by member states. It is only programs, and it's normal for programs for partnership because it doesn't have technology. You need human resources you may not have. But of course, everybody recognizes that depending on development financing is not good. The reduction now is almost up to 60%. That there is a conscious move to move so that the African Union will move ahead. And if you look at the new programs that are in place, including the Continental Free Trade Area, it's moving quite well. In fact, I was quite surprised to see that take off very quickly. So what I see, the agenda, and as Professor was mentioning, it will be important for whoever is going to be elected to read the reforms, not only the reforms, but there is also an action agenda. The reform is one aspect, but there is also the integration agenda, the peace and security agenda, which needs to be done for the continent so that the continent can move forward.
All right, just one, in response to that, Professor Migai Akech, lastly from you, Raila Odinga previously served as High Representative for Infrastructure. There has been this debate around it is easier to fly or travel out of the continent than it is to move around the continent. Do you see, I mean, do you think he will have much of an impact in that regard? Should he succeed in his bid, do you think?
It should. And again, this is not a new item, or it's one of the reform items. And from around since 2018, I believe, because you cannot have the FCFTA will not work if we are not able to travel easily across the continent and if there's no free movement of people as well. So those two issues have to be, whoever comes in as the new AUC chair has to pay critical attention to that issue as well. It is important that we open up Africa's skies. Some effort has been made towards that end, but from my perspective, it's not nearly enough. There are too few countries that are committed to it.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Migaya Ketch, who is a professor of law, served as a governance expert at African peer review mechanism. And we've also had in studio Ambassador Erastus Mwencha, who served as deputy chair of the AUC Africa Union Commission. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, we take a break, but coming up,